Good morning to my co-masterants. Good morning to our professor, Dr. Leandro Citorion. I am Mrs. Hasmin C. Peligro from Gindulman District, and I'm going to report assessment as learning. The objective of my report is to identify the assessment as learning from other purpose of assessment. So let me define first the following word, assessment. It is the evaluation or estimation of the nature, quality, or ability of someone or something. The assessment on educational needs. Another term, assessment as learning. It involves students' reflection of learning, monitoring of her or her own progress. Supports students in critically analyzing learning related to circular outcomes. And is student driven with teachers' guidance and occurs throughout the learning process. So, assessment of learning, assessment for learning, and assessment as learning. So, these are the different assessment purpose. So, let us identify their meanings. Assessment of learning occurs when teachers use evidence of students' learning to make judgment on students' achievements against goal and standards. So, determining the students' performances through assessment is what we call assessment of learning. So, for us to know whether they learn or not, or for us to know who will be the top among the class. Assessment for learning is ongoing assessment that allows teachers to monitor students on a day-to-day basis and modify their teaching based on what the students need to be successful. So that's assessment for learning. And the last one, assessment as learning. It occurs when students are their own assessors. Students monitor their own learning, ask questions, and use range of strategies to decide what they know and what they can do, and how to use assessment for a new learning. So different types of assessment can help you understand students' progress in various ways. So there are many types of assessment. So formative, summative, and diagnostic. Those are the different types of assessment for us to know their progress. This understanding can inform the teachers to their teaching strategies used. You may lead to different adaptations. So in your classroom, assessment generally have one of these three purposes. So again, these are the different purposes of assessment. Number one, assessment of learning. Number two, assessment for learning. And number three, assessment as learning. So for me, I would choose assessment of learning and assessment as learning. So assessment of learning because I will be the one to monitor students' progress as well as a teacher. And as a teacher, I will be also giving scores to students. So it is important the promptness of posting scores in every assessment for them to know. So let's now discuss the assessment as learning. Actively involve students in the learning process. So it was defined earlier. It teaches critical thinking skills, problem solving, and encourage students to set achievable goals for themselves and objectively measure their progress. They can help engage students in learning process too. One showed that in most cases, the students pointed out the target knowledge as the reason for the task to be interesting and engaging, followed by the way the content was dealt with in the classroom. Assessment as learning. Okay, so the upper part, summative tests or summative assessment, and at the bottom is the formative assessment. So here, at the upper part, we have assessment of learning. So the teacher is responsible. The teacher is the decision maker. So example, students self-assess and receive a grade for this judgment. Students and staff both grade the work summative co-assessment. Okay, so it is the intersections of the assessment of learning and assessment as learning there. And then students and the teachers work for determining the students' assessment results. Then, assessment for learning, a part or the intersecting part here between the assessment of learning and assessment for learning. So, it states the low stakes graded in class participation. So, monitoring. Usually, it is in between the assessment of learning and the assessment for learning. So, students and teachers feedbacking, to give feedback on learning and teaching. Space between the assessment as learning and assessment for learning, it is the students request feedback based on their self-monitoring. You see, students feedback. Then, assessment as learning, the blue one, student self-review and or peer review to make judgment critical evaluation of their work. Then, students judge their work based on the holistic and analytic criteria or by comparing exemplars recognized by the advisors, teachers, principals, administrators. So, ma-encourage po sila. Students collaborate to develop their own shared assessment criteria, and teachers let them know their status. So, there's a tendency that they will strive harder to reach their set criteria for assessment. Assessment as learning encourages students to take responsibilities for their own learning. So, sila na mahibaw, no? Sila na responsable. Middle to top ang level of students. It requires students to ask questions about their learning. So, assessment as learning, kuan po sila, no? It encourage the students to ask, required or ask about their learning. It involves teachers and students creating learning goals to encourage growth and development. Provide ways for students to use formal and informal feedback and self-assessment to help them understand the next step in learning. There are times na you can call them and just an ordinary conversation between the students and the teacher. So that's what we call informal one. Encourage peer assessment, self-assessment, and reflection. So peer assessment between you and the students. Self-assessment, so she or he will be the one to assess herself. Examples of assessment as learning. So, muna siya ang mga different assessment for assessment as learning. So, evaluative assessment, self-assessment, peer assessments. So, here, evaluative is defined as a specific type of survey or assessment in which the participant is forced to select one opinion among other socially desirable options. Then it is drawn from the Latin word ipse, which means self, and it's also known as the forced choice scale. So, murago anay laing kuan yes or no ra, now or never. Unlike other types of assessment, evaluative assessment questions a person or compares a person with himself. The evaluative assessment also does not have the scale with which the answered questions are measured. So, like an objective type of test and recorded ang mga scores, measure nimo. Unlike other normal assessment where the respondents respond to questions with scaled response. Okay, it's a purpose of evaluative assessment used to measure how most true and more desirable a statement is. Sa katinuod. Yeah. Bugo ka o dili. Naranaw, so may yun na mga kuan, it's 50-50 basis. So, yes or no. Nara. Useful when desirable traits of an individual are to be evaluated. So, mo to siya ang F-sative. Then, it helps identify deceptions and can bring out high level of neuroticism in the participants. Next is self-assessment, the act of or process of analyzing and evaluating oneself or one's action. Samples of self-assessment: thumbs up and down assessment. So it's a classic for good reasons. It's simple, fast, and doesn't bring with it intimidation or of a test or exam. Better yet, it can be done anonymously so students can avoid potential embarrassment. However, while thumbs up and down can give you a quick overview of what knowledge might need some refinement or revisiting, it can't give you a nuanced view of exactly where your student's level of knowledge is. For that, it's better to use the self-assessment. Then the third one is peer assessment. Provide a structured learning process for students to critique and provide feedback to each other on their work. It helps students develop lifelong skills in assessing and providing feedback to others, and also equips them with skills to self-assess and improve their own work. So here are the example. A discussion, okay, graphic organizer, journal, kinesthetic assessment, learning and response logs, observations, online quizzes, and polls. My insight: assessment are a very important tool in evaluating students' performance. It is necessary to have a transparent and prompt and posting results of assessment for the students to view and evaluate themselves. To rate oneself is an awareness on how to drive and set goals in order to improve themselves. Benchmarking is much helpful but sometimes discouraging to students, partly especially when they are too close to failure. So they may think they can't make it and lose self-confidence. For honor students, they surely want to know their assessment's result to compare with other honor students too. So the assessment as learning is good among other purpose of assessment because it encourages them to realize the grade they wish for. So makabuot nila ang ilang grado nga gusto. So gusto ko nga ma-honor ko. So from this, they will monitor starting from the very start till the end of the school year. So ilang ma-monitor gani ang ilang scores na attendance nga ilang i-improve. Those are all about my report, insights, my references. And thank you for listening and happy weekend, everyone.